Welcome to another episode of 3.5 Cast. I'm your host, Mike, and with me today are Debatra
Hey guys.
and Fantasy Pen.
Good evening.
And today we are going to talk about the base classes of the Player's Handbook 2. May or may not get through all of them. Let's find out. Fantasy Pen, you want to start us off?
Sure. All right. The first class out of the four we have here with us tonight is the Beguiler. At first brush, this looks like a fairly standard full casting class. It has a half level BAB, a strong will save, and a d6 hit die. Where this class deviates from your standard core caster, well, you can see it in the very first line. Armored Mage. The Beguiler is one of the few classes that can cast spells while wearing armor and not have any spell failure in 3.5. It trap finding as the rogue ability, and it is one of the so-called fixed list casters, alongside the War Mage and the Dread Necromancer. Aside from trap finding and the Armored Mage ability, the Beguiler's class features are entirely geared around allowing it to cast spells undetected. They have cloaked casting, and which makes their spells harder to resist if they cast it without the opponent being aware. They get Silent Spell and Still Spell as bonus feats, allowing them to cast their spells unseen. Their advanced learning ability allows them to pick up what few spells there are within their specialty that they don't already have. Mike, why don't you tell us about
Advanced learning.
the spell list?
Ah, yes, the spell list. So I do like the Beguiler spells. I think there are some spells unique to Player's Handbook 2 that are fairly underwhelming, that kind of fill out the spell list. But overall, I think it's pretty good. I want to start by saying that there are some notable absent spells. So, being that the Beguiler is all about enchantment and illusion, you'd think that they would have the best of those spells from illusion. No, most notably, I think what programmed image they don't have. They don't have the shadow conjuration, shadow evocation. I feel like without those spells, it really brings the Beguiler down a notch. Not that it's a bad class. By all means, I think it's a great class. I really enjoy it. One of my players was in it in one of my campaigns. I think not straight Beguiler, but for probably a good like 9 or 10 levels straight Beguiler. So um, it was pretty enjoyable. There's a lot of fun spells. I like Legion of Sentinels as one, which when you when you get into 3D combat, you can have this nice sphere of phantom sword swinging, I don't know, invincible little guys. It's kind of funny, and I did the math one time because there was a dragon, and it would have been 44 attacks. He didn't cast it, and I was like, nah, don't bother casting it because it's a fairly low to hit, considering that it's a third level spell, and it would have been very unlikely that they hit the dragon in this particular case because they were getting a higher level at that point. But just the fact that if you cast it right in front of where large or larger creature is flying, and then it flies right through it, it could get all these AOs, and yeah, 44 in the 3D. So kind of fun. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it from just like what can they do, at a glance, you see all kinds of illusion and enchantment throughout all of the all 9 levels. Well, I guess if you count 0 to 10 levels, but I always just ignore the 0 level stuff. So they've got Charm Person, Color Spray, Hypnotism, Obscuring Mist, like all the low level stuff that you would expect to be on somebody who's focusing on enchantment and illusion. Then some of the ones that I mentioned that I don't really like from this book include Rouse, Vertigo, Whelming Burst, Stay the Hand, Hesitate. Although I I should hesitate to say hesitate because there were maybe 2 times that it proved useful. But man, my Beguiler tried to use it a lot and it was fairly ineffectual. Maybe it was just the rolls were against him. I don't know, but I was very disappointed with that spell. Let's see what else.
What are the effects of hesitate?
Hesitate. It's an immediate
It's
action.
unique to Player's Handbook too, so
Yes.
it's not seen.
Yes. So everything, I'm pretty sure all of the spells in Player's Handbook 2 are unique to it because I don't think that they were included in the spell compendium, which is pretty much the only other place it would have been.
Well, it was published after the spell compendium was, I believe.
Well, there we go. That explains it. I mean, there are some books that didn't get included in the spell compendium that were printed before, but this is not one of them. So, yeah, as I was saying, Hesitate is an immediate action spell, and you cast it at the start of an opponent's turn. And so there's a will save and spell resistance, so obviously, multiple things can fail when you're trying to use it. It's also a range of close. But what you can do is basically make the subject doubt themselves. They hesitate. So if you get past their spell resistance and they fail their save, they take no action. They can still move, but they lose their standard action. So it sounds pretty powerful if they're going to fail their save. But like I said, I don't know if it was just that the dice happened to be against him, but I really only remember, I think twice, that it actually helped the party. And he tried it a lot, so I think it's just because you have to bypass spell resistance and the saving throw. And that is part of why I think the Beguiler is a little worse off than you might think of a full caster because it focuses on enchantment and illusion. So many of those spells are mind affecting. They're almost all gonna allow both a will save and spell resistance. So there's just so much that can go wrong. But back to the abilities. I really wanted to say that the reason why you would stay in the Beguiler if you've got either a long running campaign or a high level campaign, the 20th level ability for cloaked casting is that it overcomes spell resistance. And I think that it's actually a pretty interesting ability. At first, you might think, oh, so what? Like, you can overcome spell resistance with a lot of different ways of boosting cast level, what have you, what have you. But the fact that at 20th level, you become able to automatically overcome the spell resistance of any affected target, that has an interesting implication, I think. And that is that if you have something such as a golem that has basically spell resistance infinite, not anymore, because you overcome any spell resistance, even infinite. Or at least that's what I like to think.
Although most golems are going to be immune to the Beguiler's spell list anyway.
Yes, but not necessarily all of the spells. So it's just an interesting workaround
that
the
is
magic
what
immunity.
advanced learning is for. If it's for grabbing spells that aren't on your spell list that you can still use.
And there's that.
Or you can just take the extra spell feat.
So yeah, I think that that's just an interesting use of the capstone that may not have been, the intention. It might have just been, oh, now you can overcome spell resistance. But it's just interesting for something with, supposedly infinite spell resistance. Oh, look, doesn't matter anymore. Oh, and I also wanted to say, as far as the armored mage goes, it's actually one of the most limited of all of the casting classes that get the ability to wear armor, because most of the other classes, at least the ones I can think of off the top of my head, get at the very least light and medium, even if it's progression, and then some also get heavy. So beguilers only get the option of wearing light and having the penalty negated. Still, it's better than nothing, but
I mean, I don't think they have medium armor proficiency.
well, I mean that's kind of my point. Like it, I think Wizards of the Coast thought that an armored mage would have been, oh no, that's too much. But it's already a full caster. Like full casting is already too much. Like just
Yeah,
letting
they
them gish and go into melee with armor would have been more fun and not overpowering because not everyone's going to do that. It just would have
well,
been a nice to have another option.
several developers did state on the forums that they did at the time think it was stronger than it really was.
Oh yeah, for sure. Just I mean, and it wasn't just armored mages either. Like look at Hexblade for example. Like he's not even a
Oh,
full caster,
that
and
is
they thought that
such
he
a
was going to be
mess.
overpowered.
That is such a mess.
Yeah. And I feel like this was, I mean, Player's Handbook 2 was published so late into 3.5, you know, May of '06, that they should have known it would be okay to give it more than light armor. I mean, it's so focused on the enchantment and illusion, like I've talked about. Like,
I
there's so many
think
things that
it's
could go wrong, man. Just
I
let
think
them
it just
wear armor.
fits their roguiness a bit more.
Yeah, but okay, so I totally see that. But when I think illusions, I love to think of magically uh, disguising yourself. So I don't know. If you're not going to be wearing armor anyway, what are you going to do? Make yourself look like you're wearing armor so that somebody tries to come and hack you to pieces? I don't know. That doesn't work as well as the opposite. You know, if you're wearing all this cool armor and then you make it look like you're not wearing anything, and then like, oh, we could take this guy. You know, he looks like nobody. Let's get him. And oh no, it's actually like wearing full plate and casting spells. Like I don't know. To me, that's where it would be much more fun to have something like that. That kind of disguise.
I mean, I can't say you're wrong. It's just personal preferences, I think, and flavor. That's all it boils down to.
Yeah, and I mean you've got a strong point there because the flavor is reflected in the spell list too. Like I actually I started a breakdown of how many of the spells are in enchantment and illusion and other schools, and I never finished the breakdown. And I probably should because it's I mean it's probably like 90% of their spells are or more are just enchantment and illusion. It's most of them. It's almost like a focused uh, specialist wizard that has also taken Incantatrix levels, so they're down to 4 schools of magic. It's almost that bad. Although I guess technically it's worse since it's a fixed list, so they have fewer spells. Yeah, should have thought that one through. They get time stop. That's
That
good, right?
just why is that on their list?
I don't know. There
By the
are
time you hit 9th level spells, I think it's less about any particular theme and more about, well, okay, these are the 9th level spells. We've only got like 12 of them.
but why don't they have
That
shades
is
then?
another thing that bothers me about the Beguiler. Why do they have ninth level spells to begin with? I
Well,
feel like they should have been like the Duskblade, where they only went up to like fifth or sixth level spells, and then you raise their base attack bonus a bit.
if so, let's say they had bard casting, then you'd have to stick with the whole enchantment illusion thing, but give them higher level spells at lower level because they wouldn't have enough and they wouldn't participate. They would be so far behind because illusion and enchantment are already weaker schools generally.
I object
Generally.
strenuously.
Okay. Uh so I feel like losing out on the highest, let's say in this case 3 spell levels would really put them at a disadvantage.
Yeah. I mean, those who know me are probably wondering why I'm not saying much about a class that. Because not on this podcast, but I've been very vocal about my love of illusion magic. And the simple fact as to why I'm not saying much about a base class that's focused on illusion and enchantment is simply I've never played one before. Weird as that sounds.
So my party's beguiler actually went into Shadowcraft Mage, and
Nice.
I I don't remember what the actual prerequisites are for Shadowcraft Mage. I tend to lax the prerequisites a lot in my campaigns, so I'm not sure how rules as written legal the build was, but it was a fun character with the addition of Shadowcraft Mage in there because he had access to a lot of the illusion magic that he should have, in my opinion, should have had access to normally, because I think the Beguiler spell list should have included all of the shadow spells. But good times.
Just briefly glancing over the Beguiler spell list. I mean, unless there was an advanced learning used, because that's the only thing that I think a Beguiler would have any issue as far as the Shadowcraft Mage's prerequisites. Because you need 4th level casting, but I believe a 3rd level or higher shadow spell.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, you also need a couple of skill ranks in Bluff and Hide, but both of those are Beguiler class skills anyway.
Yeah, no problem there. Yeah, I think the shadow spell might have been the issue. I probably just gave it to him or something.
And other than that, you need to be a gnome, but there's even a sidebar in the same book that allows for non-gnome Shadowcraft mages.
Yeah, racial prerequisites are like the first thing I get rid of. Second thing, alignment prerequisites, like bloop bloop.
Me too, usually.
Well, shall we move on to the next one?
Certainly.
Sure.
Actually, we've covered the Dragon Shaman in, I think, 2 different now. Do we need to go over it a third time? Well, correction, I've gushed about it for 2 different podcasts now. Do you really need to hear me gush about it a third time?
How about... So, okay. We've gone over, what, the base abilities, right?
Yeah. More base abilities and the ways you can customize it.
So how about what prestige classes would go well with a Dragon Shaman base? Think of anything?
The Dragon Shaman isn't designed to prestige class well at all. It's designed to be run... Yeah, it's designed to be run quite literally from level 1 to 20. If you look at it, it has 0 gaps in its progression.
Oh, there are other classes that are meant to go to level 20 that people still prestige class out of. Then, I would say this. How about Gestalt? What would you like Gestalted with the Dragon Shaman?
My favorite to Gestalt it with is actually the Duskblade.
I could certainly see that.
The 2 pair surprisingly well mechanically, if not necessarily in terms of flavor. If you were asking me for a more flavorful way to Gestalt it, Arian is definitely a runner-up.
As far as Duskblade goes, wouldn't you kind of lose any and all incentive to use your breath weapon, which is a primary feature of the Dragon Shaman, though? Because if you do it with Duskblade, you're going to want to be all about the channeling, the arcane channeling. So if you're going to be up there doing the melee spell thing...
Well, the Duskblade is also, for the most part, it has a few ray spells, but it's also rather short on ranged options. So they complement each other relatively well.
Yes. Also, your breath weapon in the Dragon Shaman has a cooldown. So you stack meta magics, you stack meta breath feats on it, you'll have a 5 or 10 round cooldown, and you spend that time using your arcane channeling. Then when it's back up, you breathe again, and then you lather, rinse, repeat.
That's interesting.
Isn't there some kind of feat that lets you trade in spell slots to reduce your breath weapon's cooldown?
If there is, I can't say I've seen it before.
I might be pulling that out of nowhere.
You might be mixing up the ability that lets you the sorcerer feat that will let you trade spell slots to make a breath attack.
Maybe.
All right, I think we can move on to the next class then, which we actually just mentioned, the Duskblade.
All right. I've gone on record saying the Dragon Shaman is my favorite class out of this book. The Duskblade is the one I've played the most.
I would have to agree with that second part at least.
Yes, so what at first can seem like a semi-limited chassis actually becomes surprisingly versatile, especially if you figure out ways to trade away certain proficiencies and then replace them with other class ACFs. For example, are either of you familiar with the Dragon Scale Husk?
Yep.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Okay,
Short,
it's in Races of the Dragon or Dragon Magic. I can't remember
Dragon
which
Magic.
one. Thank you. I had a feeling, but I didn't want to say it flat. If you have heavy armor proficiency, you can trade that all away, and you gain a natural set of medium armor, which you are proficient with, that will scale as you level up. Ha, scale pun. The Dragon Scale Husk gets a pretty decent boost. It keeps up reasonably well with full plates, at least I believe it does. I haven't done too much hard number crunching. The only drawback is that if you have the Dragon Scale Husk, it negates all other armor and natural armor bonuses that you might receive. My personal favorite thing to do with the Duskblade is pair up Dragon Scale Husk with improved unarmed strike and superior unarmed strike. You do that, and suddenly you've got a fairly decent wuxia protagonist, particularly when you use the Swift Flight and Swift Expeditious Retreat spells from their list to sort of high-powered martial arts that you see in that genre.
I'm looking at the description now. It caps at a very impressive plus 12 at 18th level, which, unless you get into the exotic armors, which we can talk about that with the Duskblade later because of a misprint that even the errata didn't catch. But unless you get into the exotic armors, plus 12 is definitely more than you're going to get, even with a pretty high enhancement bonus tacked on to full plate.
I would like to add that the Duskblade probably has my favorite artwork of the PHBII classes. Pretty badass.
Yeah, that's hard to argue.
I like purple. I'll say that much at least.
The only thing that bothers me is that they are wearing full plate and it doesn't look like it's mithril.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's just painted over, because off the top of my head, I can't think of any purple metals in D&D land.
About that purple rhino class? Is that right?
The Purple Knight, you mean?
Yeah, that. Somebody's got purple in their name.
All right.
So, what's your favorite use of arcane channeling?
Good cleric.
Blade of Blood, Shocking Grasp, Vampiric Touch. Put those on an unarmed strike and just call out your favorite Dragon Ball Z attack.
Give him a whip and a couple of cleric levels, or actually, if you're in a Gestalt game, then go Duskblade Cleric, maybe with Geomancer on the cleric side. If you're not in a Gestalt game and you still want high tier divine casting to go with it, Duskblade 13, Priest 7.
Man, when you bust out Priest, you're already getting the DM to prime a DMG for your head.
Yeah, well, at that full attack channeling at 13th level, it just opens so many doors, especially if you've got a reach weapon. Especially if that reach weapon doesn't actually have to do real damage to the opponent, like say a whip with a lesser crystal return that you don't need to do damage against armored opponents. You just arguably just need to make a touch attack, but that's not raw.
I just thought of a really interesting combination here. I need to look it up before it's hardly wrong. It's a Tomb of Battle combination here. Ooh, I think it does work. So, Bloodstorm Blade lets you, as a full round action, make a ranged attack with a thrown weapon at your highest base attack bonus against as many targets as you wish. And one of the earlier, and that's Blade Storm, its 10th level ability. And the earlier level ability allows your ranged attack to count as melee. So you could do an arcane channeling full attack against everyone within thrown range. It's kind of interesting. I don't know what level you'd have to be for that to function.
Well, if it's the 10th level ability, you would have to be level 23.
Unless maybe you could do it earlier with Gestalt, but yeah.
Well, yes, but Gestalt is a whole other barrel of monkeys that I didn't realize we'd be talking about today.
And here we are. I am going to have to theory craft this at some point because Duskblade, Bloodstorm Blade sounds like a very interesting combination.
Ooh, that is.
So let's see. We've covered our favorite ways to use the class. We touched on what their main trick is. Perhaps we should talk about the spell list now.
I think that the Duskblade spell list does not have nearly enough arcane channeling capable spells.
It doesn't have enough spells, period.
Well,
I don't understand why they're not a fixed list caster.
Yes, that too. That's definitely an issue. I mean, considering their main thing, their main ability is arcane channeling. And
so many
just the touch spells. Why aren't they should just all be race spells. Just there shouldn't be anything that isn't a race spell, I feel like. So that they can just use
Well, they
all
can't
the cool
channel
options.
raise at all. They can only channel melee touch attacks.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's just touch. It doesn't specify melee touch, does it?
I think it's touch range.
Any touch spell you know. So it can be ranged or melee. It does not specify.
I mean, that's drifting a little bit into TO, but arguable.
I would definitely give them the benefit of the doubt because there's so few spells as it is.
Honestly, this is the first time I've heard anyone argue for that capability.
Go me.
I mean, even if you look at their handbook, it doesn't even imply that as an option.
It's not like that's an official source or anything.
Another oddity with the Duskblade spell list I've noticed is they only get up to 5th level casting. And for the most part, the spells on their list are on the same level as the equivalent spells for, say, a sorcerer or wizard. Like Bull Strength is a 2nd level spell for them, True Strike's 1st level. But then you've got some oddities like Dispel Magic as a 4th level spell, which Duskblade doesn't get his first 4th level spell until level 13.
Yeah, they kind of went backwards on that one.
Yeah, and by that point, the wizard has greater Dispel Magic.
Yes, their spell list is just a mess and a half. It doesn't have enough spells, and what spells it does, they seem to have placed almost without really considering how these spells might fit together.
I'm almost surprised that their caster level isn't cut in half.
I think if that had been done, nobody would play this class.
Yeah, that would very much be a nail in the coffin kind of thing. With the exception of weird builds like, say, the full attack healer or buffer.
Yes.
Because that is 13th level Duskblade with a whip is basically the poor man's reach spell and the poor man's chain spell.
I like that description.
So I think we can call that the Duskblade in a nutshell. A very impressive chassis, nearly crippled by a terrible spell list that we make use of its core feature.
I suppose one final thing is just bringing back the armored mage argument that I was making before. They do get a progression to heavy armor. They don't start with it; they eventually get it. So I feel like maybe because the Duskblade got that, they didn't give it to the Beguiler just to distinguish the two.
Well, it's not heavy armor; it's heavy shields and medium armor.
Excuse
me. Yeah, which in itself is weird.
But still, like, just the fact that there's precedent for it in the same book. Like, they could have done it, even if it was higher level or something. It still would have been nice. I still think,
I think they envisioned the Beguiler as more of a saboteur or espionage agent,
and what better way
while
to do
the
that
Duskblade was
than
expected to be on the front line.
Agreed.
True form.
And
I think you're a little too fixated on that one aspect.
I am.
Maybe. Although I will say, again, speaking of armor proficiency, everyone pretty much assumes this is a misprint, but even when Player's Handbook 2 was errata, they didn't touch this. The Duskblade is proficient with all armor, not just light, medium, and heavy, but all armor, which would include certain exotic armors that I think maybe literally no other class, except maybe some prestige class that I'd never heard of, gets automatic access to. And those exotic armors, they can definitely have the potential to reach, if not bypass, the Dragon Scale Husk.
I assume you're referring to the Dwarven exotic armors.
Mostly, yes, though there may be others that I'm not aware of.
So why is it that they gain access to that?
It's just an odd wording. Most classes, when describing weapon and armor proficiency, will say simple and martial weapons, maybe a couple of specific weapons. as well as heavy arm. Well, let's just.
Huh. You're right.
Hang on. While I'm on the.
That is strange.
It's easier than
as
yeah.
well as all armors.
Armor,
Yes,
heavy,
and-
medium, and light. Whereas
Yeah,
the
and-
Duskblade just says all armor.
But then, why do they even have the? Yeah, that's so strange. Huh.
Very strange.
Oddly enough, they also don't get tower shields.
Well, nobody gets tower shields except the fighter.
That may literally be true, actually.
Correction, there's one other class. I think it's the Crusader. They are the only class
Maybe.
outside of the fighter that gets it.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Ooh, I know. Let's talk about the knight. No, wait. We'll talk about the Crusader instead, because you brought up Crusader.
Okay, the joke was funny once, the joke was funny twice. Now you are starting to get...
No, it'll be funny every time.
Who's joking?
Because it's the knight. Alright.
I don't understand why you don't like this class.
Fantasy Pen, as the only person that will defend the knight, please, defend it. Because the Botcher and I will just tear it down.
I don't have a problem with it. I've just literally only ever seen it in one game, and I'm not too familiar with it.
Alright.
Like, I've never had a player go, "Oh, hey, can I play a knight?"
I've had players say that, and I just internally cried and externally said, please don't.
Because you're a Crusader nut. You are a Crusader fanboy, and the Crusader and the Knight share the same niche. They are tanks in the online video game RPG sense. They pull aggro, and they are nigh indestructible.
I'll have you know that I was far more familiar with the Player's Handbook 2 before I had even read Tomb of Battle. So, that's not why. It is true I like the Crusader, but it's not why. Knights just suck.
The Crusader is just... The Crusader is just weird.
Yes.
Like,
That's the best description of the Crusader.
What is that maneuver method? Like, everyone else prepares like a wizard equivalent, but which probably doesn't do the whole Tome of Battle is just magical marshals argument any good. But like, imagine if the sorcerer had to roll dice to see which spells he could cast from round to round, and you've got the Crusader.
I'm pretty sure I saw that as a homebrew of Wild Magic once.
I was gonna say that.
And nobody touched that campaign.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Wild Magic is fun if you know what the hell you're getting into in the first place. Like, one of the campaigns I'm playing in at the moment, we happened to stumble on this potion that was made with chaos magic, and the DM literally showed us the chart that we would be rolling off of if one of us ever drank it. It was like a D10,000.
Goodness.
What did they do? Put every single possible potion effect on there?
Oh no, there was weird shit like... I mean, there were some of your standard fare, like... healing for X amount, or maybe getting a permanent bonus to an ability or a penalty to an ability. But there was also weird shit like everyone within a certain burst area gains +2 to intelligence if they're wearing a hat.
Very interesting.
I thought it was going to be more like...
But we're getting sidetracked, and it's time to talk about the Knight.
Yes, no more delays.
Do we have to?
Yes, Mike, we do.
Yes, I legitimately want to talk about the Knight just so I can learn a bit more about it, because, like I said, only seen it in action once, not too familiar.
As I have stated before, at its core, the Knight is a tank. It has a D12 hit die. Surprisingly, it has a strong will save, and its 20th level capstone mirrors the Frenzied Berserker ability in that you simply cannot die by hit point damage.
But that means you were 19 previous levels of Knight.
I'm pretty
Again,
sure that
the joke is wearing old, Mike.
It's not a joke.
I'm pretty sure I submitted something to the dysfunctional handbook about that capstone.
Do you remember what it was?
Something. I think it had something to do with. Well, obviously, because it was the capstone, it has something to do with the delayed death thing, but something about how you can accidentally auto-kill yourself with it, even if you heal properly. Let's see. Expend the use of your knight's challenge to remain conscious in fighting.
Well, as far as the Loyal Beyond Death ability goes, it's far worse than the Frenzied Berserker because it only gives you one round. If you're still at -10 or lower after that one round, you go down.
Well, you can keep using uses of your knight's challenge to keep yourself alive round to round.
And
Well,
you will
yeah,
have
but-
a lot of uses of the Knight's Challenge.
Okay, assuming you do, yes. But the point being that if you're going to compare it to a Frenzied Berserker, I mean, there's an obvious discrepancy in the power between the two of them. No one says, oh, I'm going to ban the Knight from my game, it's too OP. No. Nobody's going to say that.
It's significantly more obscure as well.
I mean, I wouldn't call it obscure
I
so
will
much as
look up
less
that
played.
post.
It's a base class in Player's Handbook 2. I mean, that's like one of the more common books to come across in my experience. Like, it's just less played, I think.
The class's biggest drawback is this strange focus it tries to put on mounted combat, which, to be fair, that is what knights were during the medieval period.
Sort
But
of.
it doesn't necessarily mesh with what the rest of the class does.
This is true. And also, I think a big hit against the Knight is that it did come kind of late in 3.5, and it has so many, I'll say, opposing classes to fill the same role. I mean, just out of core, like fighter, ranger, paladin, they all kind of fit that, like, tough fighter guy that if you don't have a sense of optimization, you would just already be aware of what's in core and you just pick that.
I mean, it's not just being durable. Like I said, they can pull aggro, which is
I understand. I'm not
very
talking
difficult
about
to
that.
do.
What I'm saying is that it's filling. If you are,
Yes,
again,
it's in a niche that is very heavily populated.
yes, that's all I'm saying. It's got so much, competition and just within the core. Then you go outside core, you've got all kinds of other things too in battle, complete warrior, etc.
Oh, okay, now I see what it is. The dysfunction. It's a weird dysfunction, but it is. Okay, so Loyal Beyond Death will let you keep on fighting if you're at 0 or fewer hit points as normal. If you get healed up so that your hit point total is higher than -10, you will survive as if you had just not been damaged. But at the same time, if you can use Loyal Beyond Death when you're reduced to 0 or fewer hit points. Now, don't get me wrong, at 20th level, the gap between 0 and -10 is razor thin anyway.
That's true.
So it's not likely to come up, but it is possible to use this ability, not get any healing, and then die from 0 hit points. Because the ability kills you if you don't get healed at all.
No,
I don't
the
think so.
ability, that is not how that works. And that's not how the reading works either.
I mean, I get where you're coming from. I totally get that. It says when you stop using this ability, um, otherwise death overtakes you when you run out of uses of your Knight's Challenge ability. But I mean, at the start of that, where it has the 0 or fewer hit points, um, it's saying you can expend a Knight's Challenge to remain conscious and continue to act. So I think that that's the important distinction, is that at 0, you choose not to act because that's going to put you down. You're going to fall down. You go unconscious. But this is saying you remain conscious while acting by using the Knight's ability.
For one more round before dying.
Yes.
It's like, this entire book, and I've got the errata file open too, and just looking at just as far as we've made it, this book could have used one more round of editing.
Was there a lot
Then again,
any errata for the Knight?
Actually, the Knight didn't get any errata.
Oh, okay.
It's just the book in general could use a little bit more editing. For
yes,
example,
it was. The proofreading wasn't the best.
yeah. For example, the Duskblade errata includes. Hang on, let me go back up and see exactly what this changes. Okay. Duskblades without the errata are only proficient with martial weapons. The errata gives them simple weapons, for example.
That's an interesting thing that they missed, actually.
Yeah. And the Beguiler, they had to errata in how to calculate their caster level. Just simple equivalent to class level. It's not a special calculation, but it's just they left that part out.
Huh. I've never noticed that about the Duskblade before.
They did that to the Duskblade too, actually. The caster level thing.
There are no casters in this book.
They also, apparently there's an example on page 9 of the Beguiler using the Grease spell, which they don't get.
I mean, they could do
Advanced learning.
Yeah, it could be advanced learning. It's still.
Grease is conjuration, not illusion or enchantment.
Eclectic learning, then.
Extra spell.
Sure, why not?
So that's
I mean,
so
it's not like there aren't multiple ways to get spells that aren't on your list.
No, absolutely. It's just one of the odd ones.
Indeed.
Yes.
So we sort of jumped around a bit. Do we want to cover the rest of their Knight Challenge abilities?
Yeah, we did kind of skip straight to the capstone there.
Yes. Fighting Challenge in particular is rather interesting.
Do go on.
Okay, the Fighting Challenge is the very first use of the Knightly Challenge power that you receive. It is, in a way, the namesake of the ability. As a swift action, you can issue a challenge to a single opponent. The target of this ability must have an intelligence of 5 or higher and have a language of some sort, and have a CR greater than or equal to your character level -2. So basically, any creature that is roughly of an appropriate challenge level.
What do you think, Debatra?
Well, assuming we're just... It's odd. The Fighting Challenge on its own is just...
It's a target marker.
Basically. And honestly, I shouldn't expect it to be amazingly impressive. It's a first level ability.
So one thing that bothers me about this, and I could probably say that about every single thing about it, but for this, okay, it's called Fighting Challenge, and whoever you're picking out, whoever you're issuing this challenge against, could just ignore you 100%. Like, it's just, the fluff of it, I think, falls flat. It's like, I challenge you to a duel, and then that person can just be like, Mooks, get him, and like doesn't even fight you. Like just send out a horde of people in front of him, and then it does nothing.
There are different uses of the Knight's Challenge, which
I know. I'm picking this out and just being like fluff. Okay. They probably should have picked different fluff for this because if this was fighting challenge and like forcing someone to fight you or else they take big penalties, that would make sense. That would be a good fighting challenge. But I think the way it is doesn't make sense.
Yes, now that you've mentioned that, yes, the name does seem a bit odd. The name might be more appropriate to be switched with the test of metal that you receive at 4th level.
Yes, it would.
Yes, so the names have been switched on those two.
Definitely. Let's talk about that.
All right, then.
As we sort of just implied, it's more of the... Its name was probably switched with Fighting Challenge at some point during editing, because this is the one that calls out, well, just gonna read the book here, calling out for the mightiest among them to face you in combat. They need to at least be sentient, well, slightly more than sentient, into 5. Must have a language of some sort, line of sight, line of effect. Not seeing an actual range limitation, though, aside from that.
100 feet, all enemies.
There it is. There it is.
And then they must make a will save, or they are forced to attack you over other available targets.
That would have been a great omission if they left out the range. Just get like a magical bullhorn. I know that lich is out there somewhere.
I mean, actually, now that I think of it, it's an extraordinary ability. It doesn't seem to be mind affecting, so yeah, you could get the undead lich necromancer to come out and attack you in melee.
It's all well and good until he uses his touch spells.
Well, I mean, as long as he doesn't hit you with Disintegrate, you can keep fighting.
Although, you also can't spam it, because once per day per target. Then again, it's one of those things that if you take it literally enough, it becomes hilarious when it works. This is one of the only effects I've seen that actually gives you a benefit for failure. If one of the opponents that are forced to attack you with the Test of Metal challenge manages to get you down to 0 or lower, you actually gain an additional use of your Knight's Challenge ability. And to be clear, it's an additional use, it's not recovering a use.
So you want to
Yes.
get beat up.
Yeah.
Yes, it pulls aggro and is rewarded for it.
Although I gotta say, I've seen abilities like Iron Guard's Glare that give the enemy an incentive to attack you above others. I have not actually seen many things that can outright compel enemies, especially not in an AoE, that to actually compel them to attack you. Well, I mean, of course, aside from creative uses of enchantment spells, but
Yes.
But then again, once you're mind controlling your opponents, I think you've already won the fight.
Oh, here's a fun little thing tucked away at the end of their description. Impetuous endurance. Starting at 17th level, your fighting spirit enables you to push your body beyond the normal limits of endurance. You no longer automatically fail a saving throw on a roll of a 1.
That is nice.
You might still fail the save if your result fails to equal or beat the DC. Depending on the type of person DMing your game, that is not insignificant.
It is certainly not.
And unfortunately, I know many DMs where they just see a natural 1 and they immediately out the critical failures, regardless of context. So an ability like that is most definitely a major boon.
Yeah, and honestly, even without extra special failure penalties for rolling a 1, it's just nice for the level 20 Knight in Shining Armor type to not have to worry about getting unlucky against the level 1 Wizard's Charm person. Then again, by that point, you should be immune to mind affecting anyway.
Well, this comes out at 17th level, so it's
Well, I used
not
20
just
just
charm
as
person you need to worry about.
Yeah, but I was trying to come up less of an example as of an actual threat and more of an example of something that shouldn't be a threat but is 5% of the time because of the natural 1 rule.
Right. They also have Shield Ally, a extraordinary ability which mimics the feat line, I think it was Drow of the Underdark. You know which one I'm talking about, right?
I believe so.
Yes.
Ah, yes, I see. It's kind of more like a shield other spell, but adjacent instead of cross distances.
Yes.
Well, no discussion of the Knight would be complete without bringing up the Knight's Code. And this is not as
Hey, we've
bad
got
as
other
the
toys to
Paladin.
play with.
Not as bad as the Paladin, because you can't fall, but when you do violate the code, you lose one of the Knight's challenge abilities for the day. And if you don't have any at the time, then you take a -2 penalty to attacks and saves for the rest of the day, which is pretty bad. So what is the Knight's Code? You deny yourself the bonus on attack rolls from flanking, so you never get the +2. You never strike flat-footed opponents, so that sucks. And you never deal lethal damage against a helpless foe, which is not a big deal. If they're already helpless, you can just have an ally do it. But
Subduing Strike takes care of that, no problem.
that flat-footed thing is so aggravating because
Really?
they're a martial. Like, they have to just hit, and the best time to hit is when the opponent's flat-footed. That's like your best shot, and they can't do it.
I've found that it's surprisingly difficult to get certain enemies flat-footed, particularly when your DM doesn't know how to play them as anything less than tactical mobsters or likes to ambush you.
Yeah.
Me, on the other hand,
Also,
I know of like ways to force flat-footed upon your opponents. So I mean, I think that that's just terrible.
Well, yes, but most of those aren't going to benefit the knight overly much outside of the flat-footed bonus, are they?
Well, if you have an ally that can do it, like let's say a rogue and a fighter, for example, who want to be flanking at all times to make each other benefit from it, they're better off than a knight and anyone else, because that
So
person just
your
got to stand
problem
there
is
and wait until the other
so
person goes.
ultimately your problem is that the knight doesn't mesh with your personal playstyle.
No, it's a
That's fine.
distinct advantage that you have to not use. If you go first, you just be like, all right, ready yourself. And you do that every time. That's as bad as saying, okay, I'm a fighter. I full attack again. That's
Well,
boring.
you never strike a flat-footed opponent, which is I disagree with how big of a deal you seem to make it. I see it more of a mild annoyance. You
Yes.
can also use one of your knight's abilities.
I feel like saying that it's a minor annoyance is borderline Grod's Law. It's not doesn't quite fit there, but I mean, if your
No,
main
that's definitely not Grod's law.
No.
do you understand where I'm coming from when I say it's borderline though?
Not at all.
Okay,
No.
so
I
the point
genuinely
being-
feel you are.
Because I remember the Jedi Potter thing. Grod's law, or
it's
Yeah.
you can't make it mechanically difficult to use to balance it. So
That's
Yeah.
not
right, that's why I
really
said
the
borderline,
essence of
because
it.
what you're doing here is you're making them not do their own shtick, which is, martial hitting stuff, because instead you have to wait for them to go. It's just a pointless penalty.
Attacking a flat-footed foe is the rogue's shtick.
Oh no, it's any marshals. It's a decrease in armor class. That's the best time to hit. When their armor class is lower.
You're certainly not wrong, but it's just
Alignment. It comes down
Actually-
to alignment, I think.
actually all these fighting challenge uses seem to be swift actions anyway. So,
They are.
well, they can.
They
do
are
other stuff.
swift action or passive.
I don't know, to me, one strong hit can make all the difference.
It certainly can.
If you could charge with a power attack when their AC is lowered, you could kill them. But instead, you have to wait until their armor is up. I don't know. I think that it's a lot worse than the two of you are acknowledging, and you two say that I'm making a bigger deal out of it. So we'll just agree to disagree on that.
I mean, no, I definitely get that it's an inconvenience, but
I feel that might be the point. It's a code of conduct. It is the code of chivalry. Upholding it is what differentiates you from everyone else,
yeah, I mean,
even at the cost of your personal convenience.
Yeah, but if you're
it's
playing,
kind of like saying that the Paladin's Code is an example of Grod's Law.
Exactly.
No, because the Paladin's Code doesn't stop you from doing your main thing, which is fighting evil.
So how does this stop them from doing their main thing?
Because their main thing is
It's
killing their
certainly-
enemy, and they have to wait until their enemy can fight them. The
It
best time to
hinders you
strike.
slightly for one round,
Right. Okay.
as opposed to having you.
So,
So-
a little background here for me. I am in a long-running campaign with an Uber charger, and the best time for him to do anything is getting initiative and going first with pounce, charge pounce, and it makes such a difference going first. I mean, it really, really makes a big difference in my campaign going first. So that's where I'm coming from.
Well, let the Uber Charger be the big damage dealer. The Knight is
Yeah,
more of a
but-
tanky class.
Exactly. The knight's not supposed to be the big damage dealer.
But
He's
if
supposed to be the last man standing.
and if he's supposed to be the tank and getting the attacks on him and whatever, then he should be the first one in there. But if he's just gonna stand
Well, you
there,
can
then
still
people
move
aren't
into
gonna.
position.
Yeah, he can still move in, and nothing is stopping a knight from readying his action so that as soon as his opponent stands up, he just knocks them back down.
Okay, but
Which
if
actually just sounds hilarious.
there are a bunch
Just
of other
ready a
people-
trip action so that as soon as they stand up, you just knock them over again. You're just bullying.
Yes, please, rouse yourself from your slumber. Please, fight me honorably. Come on, I said get up. I said get up.
See, Debatra gets it.
If there are a bunch of other opponents engaging you in combat, are you going to fight back or pick on the one standing there looking like he's ready to get you?
Well, obviously you're not going to do that if you're up against a swarm. But
Well, it doesn't have
If
to be
you're
a
up against
swarm,
a
but if
swarm, you
there's
have more than one opponent to
if there's
choose from.
more than one melee person, like, oh, this person's like actively fighting me, I will fight back. Not, oh, I'm going to ignore you and fight that person over there who's staring at me. I just think that the base concept behind the class doesn't fit well for third edition D&D.
So again, it's not compatible with your playstyle. That doesn't necessarily apply to everyone else. Personally, I find it highly compatible with how I tend to play certain melee types. So
yeah, and the more I look at this knight class, the more I want to try it with my Tobal build. Because I've never brought up Tobal in this podcast.
no, and that sounds interesting.
Yeah, you might have actually been in one of the games where I tried to play her.
I don't think I was. I haven't done any play-by-posts on the forum.
At all?
No, not at all. I don't mess with those.
Weird. I mean, I know I've seen you about, but anyway.
I'm usually talking in the optimization boards.
Yeah, that does not surprise me. But short version, Tobal Amsham is I'll just straight up say I got the name and general personality from one of my dwarfs in Dwarf Fortress.
Oh dear.
Yeah, because, well, here's the thing. I set up one of those spike trap training zones, and I don't know, maybe it got patched or something, or maybe I just did it wrong, because instead of a training zone, it was basically a dwarf butchery. Except for one particular dwarf that it just somehow completely worked for, and she never took a single freaking hit. She's super acrobatic, super durable, you get the idea. But yeah, ever since then I've basically been trying to make the super tank I mean, a super agile tank is probably not going to happen, because heavy armor and agility are directly opposed to each other in 3.5.
Frustratingly.
But yeah, but that build can get a stupidly high armor class at really low level. We're talking like before she meets the double digits, she can get her armor class into the 40s, including touch. And I just wish I'd known a bit more about this knight class when I'd started building that, because the one thing that she always lacked, aside from a Crusader dip here and there for stuff like Iron Guard's Glare, were ways to actually protect the allies, as opposed to just being a big irrelevant rock in the middle of the battlefield.
Yes, that is definitely... That is indeed what this is made for.
There other fighting challenge abilities we kind of skipped over are one that gives a second save to allies against fear with a bonus, but I mean, it's just against fear.
Yes, and if you've got a paladin, I'm pretty sure they can just delete the fear effect completely. So
yeah, and the other one being
Bond of Loyalty, which lets you resave against a mind-affecting spell or ability. Or rather, lets the knight make a second save.
yes, and oddly enough, you also get a fear effect.
Oh, yes.
The daunting challenge can make your opponents shaken.
Indeed.
I mean, not completely irrelevant, but you don't get into 12th level either.
Yes, although, again, it is a non-mind affecting, non-magical ability.
Yeah, but it is a fear effect, and you have there's a lot of redundancy in immunities that's like, undead are immune to mind affecting and fear. Actually, that one specific example might be wrong, but
Actually, it doesn't call itself out as a fear effect, does it? No, it
but
doesn't.
it is.
It just says they are shaken.
Yeah, you're right.
It is competing for your swift action, which is one thing against it. But the other thing is that it really is meant for weak opponents because it's your CR -2 or less.
Yes, that particular ability is. It's sort of meant as a mook stopper.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, you say it competes for the swift actions, which is technically true, but a lot of these other things, they just have a duration. So even if the duration is only measured in rounds, it's like, okay, on my first turn, I issued a fighting challenge. My second turn, I gave my ally a second save versus that fear spell that the enemy caster sent our way. Okay, this time I guess I'll make them shaken, like this little swarm of goblins. Plus, I mean, you're not lacking in. This is a very charisma-heavy class, similar to the paladin, and every time you're. Let's see, where are you? There it is. You get a half your class level plus your charisma bonus in fighting in what's the
Night challenges.
Yes, yeah, you get half your level plus your charisma bonus in night challenges per day, so you're not going to be wanting for them either. So it's like you might as well use one every round.
Yes, indeed.
Because we're talking like, okay, if you really, really pump your charisma, get yourself a +6 item for it, then by 20th level, you'll get, okay, 18 plus 6, 24. Let's say you used all 4 of, well, you get 5, but only 4 are relevant. 28. And, you know, maybe even some misc +2, like a tome if you're really lucky, by 20th level for an even 30. And that's a +10. So that'll be 20 night challenges at 20th level. Not many combats are going to last that many rounds. And, I mean, it's per day, not per encounter, but 20 should still get you through the day.
Yes, it's surprisingly equivalent to Bardic Inspiration, I believe. Or not Bardic Inspiration, Bardic Music. Sorry, I just finished a 5th edition game last night.
Actually, I'm pretty sure Bardic Music is just straight your bard level per day.
Plus your charisma modifier, I believe.
Nope, just once per day per bard level.
All right then.
Yeah. Gotta love D20 SRD.
All right. Ready to wrap this one up then?
I believe so.
Certainly.
All right. So, that will wrap up our discussion of the Player's Handbook 2 main classes. With me tonight were Debatra.
Have a nice day.
And Fantasy Pen.
Good night, everyone.
Until next time.